Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Charlotte Bronte was an English novelist and poet. She was the eldest of 3 sisters. She received a formal education throughout her childhood and worked as a governess before becoming a writer. As a female author, she reflects a feminist view throughout the novel. Female independence is a major theme throughout the book, as well as love and how love and morals balance each other. The story starts with the main character, Jane. She is a very polite, independent, and smart little girl. She lived with her mother and father, but they both died of typhoid when Jane was still young. So Jane went to go live with her aunt and 3 cousins, but they did not like her very much, and she was harassed and bullied a lot. So Jane's aunt decided to send her away to a boarding school. And here at this boarding school is where Jane meets her first friend. But the school was not everything Jane hoped it would be, and her friend died of typhoid. After being a student for a while, she decided that she wanted to become a teacher at the same school. And she was very well liked by all the girls that she taught. After being a teacher at the school for a long time, she decided to leave and become a governess at a very big house for a little girl. Jane didn't know anyone at the new house where she was working or who owned the house. One day while she was working at the house, she decided that she wanted to go for a walk in the woods. While she was in the woods, she met a mysterious man, but he was not very nice to her, and she decided that she didn't really like him very much. When she got back to the house, she learned that the man that she had met in the woods was named Mr. Rochester, and Mr. Rochester was the man who owned the house and that she was working for. Mr. Rochester invited a bunch of his friends over to his house one day to stay for a while, and one of them is Blanche, a very stuck-up, spoiled, and beautiful girl who has an interest in Mr. Rochester. And this made Jane kind of sad because over the time she'd grown to kind of like Mr. Rochester. Jane starts to notice some really weird things happening in the house. There was a fire one night and someone got attacked, and she's starting to wonder what's going on, but she decides she's just kind of going to ignore it. One day while Jane's outside, Mr. Rochester comes out and surprisingly asks her to marry him, and Jane says yes. They go to get married in a very small church that's close to the house. But before the ceremony is over, a man stands up and says that they can't get married. The man explains that the reason that Jane and Mr. Rochester can't get married is because he is already married. And this, of course, makes Jane really sad, because she finally thought she was going to have her happy ending. They go back to the house, and Rochester shows Jane where his crazy wife Bertha has been hiding in a secret room. And it's obvious that she is really crazy. Jane is so heartbroken that she runs away. But Mr. Rochester really didn't want her to leave. Jane is really hungry and tired from walking for so long. But luckily, she runs into a brother and his 2 sisters. St. John is the brother's name. And they agree to let her live there for a while until she figures out something else to do. Eventually, Jane gets her own small house, and she teaches in a small school nearby. She's pretty happy, but she still misses Rochester sometimes. One day, St. John, the man she lived with when she first got there, asked her to marry him. But Jane said no. After she said no, she started to hear strange voices that sounded like Rochester calling her name. So she went back to his house. But she learned there had been a fire that burnt down the house. And Bertha, Mr. Rochester's wife, had jumped out of a window during the fire and died. While trying to save Bertha, Mr. Rochester became blind and lost his hand, and he himself went a little insane. Now what? Read to find out what happens to Jane.